Good evening. My name is Kashawn Brown, and I am a Spring 20 initiate of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Omicron Lambda Alpha Chapter. I want to start by thanking everyone for tuning in to last night's program for the second night. Voting, the census, statehood, and COVID 19 are all topics that are in the forefront of our minds, and we were glad to be able to provide that for our viewers. Tonight, however, we will be discussing our community's fight for economic power. The phenomenal person that will lead tonight's discussion is none other than Mr. Ivory Johnson.
Good evening, and welcome to the OLA CBC Week, where today we're going to talk about economic empowerment. Again, my name is Ivory Johnson, founder of Delancey Wealth Management, and also a member of CNBC's Financial Advisor Council. And today we're going to talk about three broad topics: gentrification, creating generational wealth, as well as closing the wealth gap. And today we have a very exciting cast of characters who are going to help walk us through all these topics. First, we have Aris Scales, who serves as the Chief Service Officer for the District of Columbia, where she leads Serve DC, the Mayor's Office on Volunteerism and Partnership, coordinating multi-sector relationships and citywide service initiatives to amplify civic engagement. Aris is also the chartering president of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Incorporated with the Metropolitan DC chapter. We also have with us Brother Sean Reed McGee, a founder and managing partner of Lead Ventures, where we provide the vision and direction for four performance marketing companies. Mr. McGee was responsible for establishing and maintaining teams, systems, and client relationships that generate over $100 million in annual revenue year over year for many of the companies that he founded or consulted for. We also have Brother Marshall Taggart, who is the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Airport Director of the Montgomery County Regional for $12.5 million operating budget and a $20 million capital budget. He is a certified airport manager with the American Association of Airport Executives and serves as a board member at large with the Airport Minority Advisory Council and serves as the chair of the Airport Director Leadership Council. Brother Eldridge Allen is a senior consultant for the Business Development and Strategic Partnership for the Greater Washington Urban League, providing leadership across the league's impact areas of business and entrepreneurship. Eldridge is also a founder and principal consultant of the Nuruddin Consultancy, a Washington, D.C.-based independent consulting firm focusing on the community, business, organizational, and human development. Now, having said that, the Brother President forced me to wear this jacket and tie to be formal. But we're not going to be as formal. I'm going to address people by their first name. And so let's get right into the topics, because we hear so much about the wealth gap, that white families have 10 times as much wealth as do black families. And so, Eldridge, if you could walk us through why that is and give us some of the numbers that you've gotten from the Urban League study, and then we can discuss how we can start to close that gap.
Sure. Thank you, Ari. I guess addressing the first is why that is. Why that is systematic racism within the United States from its beginning. It has been the undergirth, and it has been, some say that racism has been America's sin, and it still has not atoned for that sin because it's still prevalent. It's still here. It need not be. If the words are to hold true, if all men, that includes women and men, are created equal, then how can this still be the case? It is a fight that we have always waged. It's something that definitely needs to be resolved. And all of our efforts need to be toward exactly how we can correct this wrong. There are some that want to keep that in place. But we know that if you're going to be true to the words and true to the people of this country, that cannot be the case. Anytime that you have a white family that on medium wealth accumulated is measured at $171,000, but then you see that a black family is 10 times less than that, $17,000 wealth measured for a black family. How can you justify that? Some will say that, well, it's a matter of not utilizing tools. It's a matter of you need to be more innovative in what you want to do. I say that it needs to be looked at as to why barriers are still in place, how they need to be broken down, why are they still justified by those who don't want us to succeed. And what can we do to actually make sure that that is eradicated and no longer the case?
Okay. Now you mentioned some barriers that we have. The basic tenets of capitalism are essentially access to capital, being paid according to what the free markets are willing to bear, enforcement of contract, and also that you're paid according. Also that it eludes me right now, but a lot of the things, the basic tenets of capitalism were not available to us. Obviously, our assets aren't fungible if my house is redlined. Obviously, I'm not paid according to what the free markets are willing to bear if customs dictate that I can't make as much money as our so-called lighter counterparts. And so that's obviously led to some of the obstacles. But I guess there would be some people who would say we can create our own generational wealth. We can do things for ourselves. And rumor has it that there are some people who want to be rich and some people who want to get rich. And so, Sean, I'm going to turn to you real quick. As an entrepreneur, talk to me about the journey of being an entrepreneur and some of the tools that you've used to maintain your business.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to join you guys this evening. It's a great pleasure. Let me start by saying it's not easy. And a lot of people, they see the glory, but they don't know the story by far. And with that in mind, again, I want to make sure that I sit back and I'll go into the deep depths of my story. It's really a little bit about skydiving. Again, the fact is people look at it and say, wow, they look up in the sky and say, you know what, that is extremely cool to be able to be floating. And there's other people who might look at it and say, that's as scary as I would never do that again, ever, won't even try it. Again, entrepreneurship kind of works that in a similar fashion, where at the end of the day that you sit back, you want to try it. And you know what, and once you are gliding, it's no other feeling like it in the world by far. But so often we sit back and someone told us that we can go work for somebody else, work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, give them all of our blood, sweat, and tears, and then sit back, get a check from them, knowing that if we get paid 100, honestly, we're probably worth 5 times that. But what happens here, but they sit back and they maintain that particular value towards us. And a lot of times we don't understand what our true value is. So with that in mind, I can kind of go into the fact of, I started when I left college. Again, after 3 years of working with, again, a company called College Bound, I went to the publisher with a really bold move and said, you know what, I'm loving what we're doing. I love the growth. However, I would love to be more of an independent contractor. With that in mind, he allowed me to go from a W-2 to a 1099. And then from that point on, things just flourished. I had now had the freedom to not only deliver a product for him, but also had the ability to be able to do my own thing. So I had some freedom. Did I work harder? The answer is yes. But was it worthwhile? By far. And I can go into the depths of that as we continue.
So it sounds like, there's a reason cubicles are built in the shape of a prison cell. And if you wanted to break out of that and maintain your own lifestyle and do things the way you wanted to do, there's obviously more than one way to accomplish the same goal. And so, Brother Taggart, I'm gonna reach out to you real quick because there are some unique opportunities in the transportation space that maybe a lot of our viewers wouldn't be aware of. If you could just walk us through some of those opportunities and the steps they can take so that they can have their own business in the transportation industry.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm used to having ladies to go first. I mean, I'm in the deep South. I'm in Alabama, not Montgomery County. I want to qualify that. And I'll tell you, Ms. Scales, don't hit me over the head if I start speaking.
I won't. I'm gonna get it in. So y'all go right ahead.
Respect women to the best of our ability. All alpha men do that. I'll tell you, being in an area like transportation component, it provides opportunities. And when you think about transportation, I'm speaking in reference to trains, planes, and automobiles, right? How can we in our environment look at opportunities in these arenas? And I think when you talk about what people utilize, when you think about how do I become an entrepreneur, or if I want to become an entrepreneur, you follow your passion, just like Brother McGee has talked about. I've had the opportunity to be an entrepreneur. I've been an executive recruiter, had my own business, work with partners and do different things. But I think when you talk about this space of transportation and the millions of dollars in the travel industry, as well as transportation industry, construction, concessions, and you look at these aspects of being an airport concessions, business disadvantaged enterprise or disadvantaged business enterprise, and understanding that airports have to in turn comply with rules and regulations that's set by the federal government to be able to award contracts and provide opportunities for folks to begin to have entrepreneurial opportunities. And that means looking and building those core kind of competencies of being able to say, how can I assess and clearly understand going from kind of an apprentice type of program to becoming an actual business owner, and doing that in the space specifically for airports, it is very lucrative. And as we go forth, Mr. Johnson, Brother Johnson, I'll talk more about it in this regard, but there are some opportunities out there for individuals who are interested in owning businesses in an airport space.
Okay. Well, now, as you alluded to, it's time for Black Girl Magic, because what a lot of people don't realize is Black women are the fastest growing demographic of business owners in the country.
Absolutely.
And Aris, you've done a great job with the coalition, leading that organization for 6 years and jumpstarting a lot of these African American female-owned businesses. So if you can talk to us about why it's so important to have women-owned businesses and some of the work that you're doing and how you can jumpstart more businesses to improve the wealth in the community.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me this evening. I'm honored to be amongst you men. I was like, I'm representing for the ladies, right? I got 100 of them behind me, lifting me up. But the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, we advocate day in and day out for women and girls. And it's interesting because sometimes I will have people say to me, well, is there really still a need to advocate on behalf of Black women and aren't we at a place where this is no longer necessary? And I go right back to, Eldridge. He laid out the stats and the data, right? The data shows that there's still a persistent and ongoing level of disparities. And so for our organization, we look at education, health, and economic empowerment from an advocacy lens. And so we have looked at data. We tune into the passion of entrepreneurs like Sean. We try to identify emerging opportunities like Marshall outlined and form our programming and our advocacy around that. And where we began to double down, we made a decision to double down about 5 years ago, was really around supporting Black female entrepreneurs. And I say female and not women, because we also recognize that there are so many young people right now who are coming up as entrepreneurs at a fast rate as well. They're blowing us away, right? So they're not waiting. They're just coming out there. And so what we've done is we've raised funds. We've awarded those funds annually to women businesses, female businesses. And our commitment is that we want to make sure that we are doing our part. And I think it's important for all of us, and we'll talk more about this, but to understand that we each play a role. And so while this is a big systemic issue, right, generational issue that we are trying to chip away at that takes a long time, bit by bit, piece by piece, we all play a role in making sure that we can level the playing field as much as we possibly can. And so for the 100, we see one of the ways that we can do that is by raising funds, making it an easy process for women to apply, making it not overly stringent, not having performance measures that aren't aligned with how women are running businesses from the communities that we're supporting. And it's really important for us too that we're focusing on women, particularly in Ward 7 and 8, because we know that east of the river, about 70% of those households are headed by women. And oftentimes those women do not necessarily have jobs that are going to allow them to begin to grow, their economic base. And so entrepreneurship is an ideal way to do that. And so that's one of the things that we're doing.
But in listening, Terry, did you want to say something, Marshall?
No, I'm listening.
I just wanted to make one point. I think Senator Scales made an important thing known, that as we look at the various pieces necessary for us to increase our numbers in this country, in those areas of disparity, you don't necessarily have to step outside of our own community. We don't have to always be in a position where we're asking those who are in power to empower us. We have those things within our own. She is empowering the Black woman to be an entrepreneur that will become a small business owner, that will become a medium-sized business owner, that will become a corporate business owner. Those resources are within our own community.
That's right.
Along with her program, the Greater Washington Urban League is part of a network through the National Urban League of at least 12 affiliate organizations that have entrepreneurship and small business development programming to help those that are looking to start businesses. Again, we have those resources. We have the materials and the expertise to look at someone who is in that ideation phase, who's looking, they know they want to be in business, they're not sure exactly what to do. They have an idea, they've had an idea that they've been incubating for possibly since they were 5 years old. Because you're seeing young entrepreneurs popping up all over the place. And I say popping, no, they're emerging. They've always been there. So now we're taking that ideation and we're putting it into motion. We understand that they need to have the resources. They need to have mentorship. They need to have a business plan. They need to have management skills. They need to know exactly what the financial structure necessary to achieve their goals. Those things are inherent inside of our community. Because if you can point to anybody that's a business owner or a Black millionaire, billionaire, I mean, we have a brother right there, and he can tell you, you know, he had to tap into some resources.
Yeah.
While he's brilliant, I'm pretty sure he utilized all of the resources that are around him. And some of those come from our organizations that are dedicated to helping us.
And to that point, and again, Ivory, I do apologize. I want to chime in. You know, to all the entrepreneurs out there, the time is never going to be perfect. Right. So don't sit back and say, oh, you know what, I'm just waiting. You know what? Start now. Do know that the fact is you're going to have numerous ideas. This might be your first, but it's not going to be your last. And with that in mind, most entrepreneurs have about 17 things going on at any given time. And guess what? Most likely about 16 of them are not going to do too well. Those failures, and that's learning experiences. And so what I do is I never take an L. I learn, but I never take a loss. So I'm always learning from each and every time, each and every one of those experiences by far. And again, so what Eldridge mentioned, as well as Eris mentioned, you talk about the fact that making sure that we tap into those mentors is incredible. I mean, the fact is having a plan and making sure that we start now. The time is never going to be perfect. So stop waiting, go in, jump into the deep end of the pool.
So I get the sense that you don't start a business on Monday and then go car shopping on Friday, that there's a process, there's a certain level of sacrifice. So anybody can chime in. I mean, just talk to us about the type of credit that you need to have, the type of relationships you need to have. You don't just decide to start a business on a whim. There's some pre-planning that has to happen. Give me a sense of how long it might take, the type of business planning you need to do so that you can have a successful enterprise and increase your odds of being successful. Anybody?
Sure. I'll start that off. The fact is that first and foremost, you need a plan that's in writing. I've met a lot of entrepreneurs and I meet a lot of people that I mentor. What they do is that plan is in their head. And that's a great place to start. Don't get me wrong. Again, because that's the passion, the heart, the head, and they want to talk about it so vividly. But you know what? Until you can put it on paper, and if you can't, find somebody who can help you put it on paper so that you can clearly articulate that so somebody can read and ask you questions. Because there might be a snag here and there that you might need to work through and work around. First and foremost. So once you put that idea on paper, then what you do is you start developing a plan. I like to always start with the end in mind. And even though there's no true end, but you know kind of where you want to be. In essence, let's say a year from now, you want to establish this restaurant. You see your doors opening up. Now I want you to sit back and take steps back. Because yes, it's going to take funding. However, it's also going to take the fact that you're surrounding yourself with knowledgeable people who understand the process. Because again, half of this is about the fact of what you have and who you are per se, but it's really about the fact that maybe who you know. So at the end of the day, so if you're surrounding yourself with knuckleheads or people who are not feeding into your passion or feeding into those particular ideas of grandeur, because guess what? Some of us are first generation thinkers like that, or entrepreneurs. And so you go and talk to even mom and dad might say, no, go get a 9-to-5 job, work in trucking, engineering, whatever it might be. You'll be safe, put 25 years in, and you're good to go. Well, guess what? That's not how it works anymore.
Yeah.
Again, by far, and what I love is the example, and I think I may have mentioned this to you guys before, is that the CEO of Yahoo decided before she became the CEO and wanted to make that decision, she said to herself, do I think I could do this for the next 18 to 24 months? And she goes, yeah. And then she signed on. So commitments change. So don't be over loyal per se to a particular company or establishment or organization, because your days are numbered. So,
well, you mentioned working for a company. For those of us who watch the NFL, they have this thing called the NFL draft every year, and so the new guys come in, and then the vets, who maybe are average players, they get displaced. And it's the same thing in corporate America to some extent, that when you hit 50 or your peak earning years, you have the biggest footprint from the healthcare perspective. They have a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders to let you go and fire you to bring in the new workers. But a broader point, though, is you're not creating wealth, and you don't own your own neighborhood. And this brings us to gentrification, which is a process, obviously, is when we have new residents come in, other people get displaced. We have a situation in DC where the corner spots, became coffee shops, where, the food deserts all of a sudden magically produced organic produce. And so this didn't happen overnight, just like starting a business. Aris, I want to turn to you. Walk us through the process of how a neighborhood gets gentrified and some of the planning that goes on years before it even happens.
How a neighborhood gets gentrified is we walk away from grandmama's house because we didn't want it, and other people come in and scoop it up, right? They reap the benefits. But I will say, I'll put on my other hat from government, how neighborhoods get revitalized. It starts with a plan, right? And I often talk to, I'm speaking with people, and we'll see the verticals go up with new buildings, new development, and people are like, oh my God, that happened overnight. Wow, that was so fast. And really, that process probably started, 2 or 3 administrations ago. It could have, 20, 15, sometimes 30 years. And we were talking the other day around how we do these comp plans all across the district. For every neighborhood, every ward, you can see what is being projected out 10, 15, 20 years. And the process to develop those plans is a public process. And so one of the things that I'm very passionate about, both from my 9 to 5, but also through the 100 and other work, is making sure that Black people understand the importance of being involved at every level of these processes, right? Not just showing up when it's the time to vote, or showing up when it's like a major hearing at council. It's showing up to the ANC meetings. It's showing up to those planning. It's showing up to the transportation. They are planning everything from sidewalks to streets to what's the zoning. And so if we're not at the table, if we're not vocal and inserting ourselves in that process, then we're going to be overlooked. I say a coffee shop in the neighborhood is not a bad thing if that coffee shop is the coffee shop of someone from that community, right? I can't celebrate Starbucks coming in if there was someone right next door who could have also had a coffee shop, if they had access to capital, if they had, on and on and on. So it's really important that we get inserted and involved. It's not sexy. It's not fun. Sometimes it can be intimidating, but you have to be there. And the more that you're involved, the more you become comfortable. And then your kids see you involved, right? And now your kids are starting to become more civically engaged. They're becoming more politically involved and astute. So these are things that are really critical, because that begins to impact not just today, but our generations who are coming behind us. And that's how, coming back to fighting for economic power, you start to make those shifts. Otherwise, again, grandmama passed away, someone offers you $500,000 for the house, you think that's a bargain. Next thing you know, they flipped it, sold it for $2 million, and you're mad, right? Because the whole community is starting to change.
Hey, Ivory?
I may bring up something.
Yeah, I wanted to go to you, because you understand that transportation and the processes and the networking and knowing how people can access government to create business owners. But why don't you go ahead and chime in?
Who is this? Who do you want to chime in?
You. I wanted you to.
Okay, not a problem. Okay, I appreciate that. This whole aspect of, and she brings up a very good point. The whole aspect of understanding, particularly in the 90s, particularly in DC and Atlanta, a lot of cities we have minority communities, particularly in urban environments, in the core environment, where people in turn have an investment of their home and it's paid for. But guess what? They can't pay the taxes on the
That's
house.
right.
And so what ends up happening, individuals within those areas, they do these massive tax lien sales. And what happens, it changes the whole fiber and fabric of how our neighborhood is. And they'll sell those tax liens on the courthouse steps. And if you come in, if you're a developer and you understand that, you not only buy one house, but you buy all of the grandmama houses, right? And so that's changed the neighborhoods block by block, have this whole opportunity where basically you're changing the fiber of what the communities are. Could government play a role in making sure that we have community investment type of funding for people to pay this? Could there be educational programs where you can understand about homestead exemption or overage exemption that you qualify for in this instance? And more importantly, when I look at Brother Sean, Brother Reed, McGee, could we in turn have investors, Black investors, to go in and purchase those tax liens for those, so we can in turn save our actual neighborhoods? It's all about understanding exactly how to use our wealth to preserve our communities. That's the key in this case.
And,
Hey, Ivory.
you mentioned, I'm going to go to you next because you're the lone Washingtonian. Somebody mentioned sidewalks. People don't realize that the size of the sidewalk determines how safe the neighborhood is. Dave Jacobs talked about in Life and Death of Great American Cities about how they built big buildings going from nowhere to no place, about how they built highways through our neighborhoods and disrupted commercial foot traffic. So if we're not at the table, we don't realize that we're on the menu. And so, as a native Washingtonian, Eldridge, give us your perspective on the evolution of Washington, D.C., and where you see us going next, as long as some of the resources you bring to bear with the Urban League.
Definitely. One thing I want to do before I start in that one, and I know it's like, Eldridge, stay in your lane, stay in your lane. I can't stay in my lane because we're about to go all over the place.
We got plenty of time.
With this is a presentation, but I hope that along with my panelists, my co-panelists, and the people who are listening in, I hope you're taking notes. I'm hoping that you're having questions for us afterwards. After this is over, I hope you're writing our names down and getting back in contact with us to find out more information. And understand that this is not just a presentation, this is a call to action.
That's right.
This is a definite call to action on all levels that we're talking about, and some of the things we're not talking about. Last night, I actually want to thank the person who occupies an address on Pennsylvania Avenue
Here it comes.
for his gift that he gave us last night. He gave us a gift. He gave us a gift. And to an extent, I think it's almost like it was a miracle action. It was a miracle action because those who were blind before, I think you see now.
Yeah.
I think you see exactly who that person is and what they believe in and what they say they're going to do and who supports them and what he supports. And if you aren't moved to action off of that, then yes, you are blind, deaf, and dumb. And dumb on whatever definition of the word dumb you want to utilize, but that's where you are right now. So if you're not taking some action right now, there's something wrong with you. And maybe we need to have a sideline conversation on a sideline or someplace else. And maybe it's kind of too dark for it to, but anyway.
You sound like wake up.
I was about to put on that uniform, but anyway. Sister Scales mentioned a document. And I want every person who is a native Washingtonian or Washington resident to go online and look this up. The DC Comprehensive Plan. All right. If you want to know what is in place, what is about to happen, what has already started to happen in our city, then you need to understand what that comprehensive plan is. They planned out exactly how this city is going to go about, what's going to be created, what's going to be torn down for new things to be created, what is going to be leveled. And what's important is that you understand that plan. It tells you what's going to happen on many different levels, economically, recreation, health-wise, you name it. Those factors that are part of your life is in that plan. And it's going to tell you what the city, along with the partnerships with organizations, corporations, and so on, are going to do for the city. And if you find that something is in that plan that is happening in your neighborhood that does not benefit you who else is living in your household, who is on your block, who's in your ward, who's in your city, then you have an opportunity to say, this does not need to happen right now or the way that you're planning it. I need to make sure that it's happening for the people around me and who I care about. And if you're not taking that action, by the time you see those fences go around those properties while they're tearing it down, and before the construction signs go up and the company's names, it's almost too late.
It's too late.
It's too late.
Yeah.
So you have the opportunity to do that now, which means that you have to take the responsibility to be informed. Now, we do elect public officials to do things for us. But in order for you to tell them what it is you want them to do for you, you need to know what it is you need to have done for you.
That's right.
Yeah. Well,
Go do them.
Well, to your point, Eldridge, I'm from New York City, and quick story, I came home from college and got a job. And the first thing I told my dad was, Dad, I'm going to buy a Jeep. And my dad said, what kind of Jeep? I said, a red one. Are you gonna put speakers in the car? I said, I'm going to have top of the line speakers. He goes, that's going to be nice. He goes, well, make sure you have a shower inside. I said, well, why would I have a shower inside my car? Well, if you're dumb enough to buy a car when we live in Manhattan, you got to get the hell out of my house. Right? And he tells me, he says, son, buy an apartment in the neighborhood. I said, Dad, this is not a good neighborhood. And he says, all that money I spent on college and you didn't learn a thing. He goes, look out the window. What do you see? I said, Dad, I see housing projects. He goes, no, past the projects. What do you see? I said, oh, I see the World Trade Center. He goes, they're never going to let this neighborhood stay the way it is. And so I bought an apartment. But people think I'm rich because I have an apartment in Manhattan. I just got it, before the neighborhood got gentrified. But the point I'm trying to make is the rent I get from that apartment sent my son to college. Now my son has no student loans. He can buy a piece of property. And so I want to shift the conversation to creating generational wealth so that we're not starting from zero all the time. And Sean, I know yesterday we were talking, and you mentioned some specific planning that people should be doing to create generational wealth. You can weigh in on what people can do so that their grandchildren don't start from zero. That would be helpful for our listeners.
Oh, without question. And it's interesting. Again, I have to sit back and I think I wear these T-shirts and things of that nature that look a little bit younger, even though I am recently now a grandfather to twins.
Wow.
So I've got one little boy, one little girl, and again, they have stolen my heart. One of the things that me and my wife did, and we started fairly young. Again, right now, I was a father at 21 years old. My wife was even younger than that. And so now we're actually empty nesters across the board and just feeling, loving the grandkids. What we ended up doing, I think, even though we were so young, I was empowered to make sure that we actually had things like a will. We were paying into our 529 plans, which of course is a college plan for our children, and I have 3 daughters. We actually had disability insurance, so it allowed me to protect the only asset that I had, which was my ability to work 24/7. No sleep, just work. So guess what? If I got hurt, I needed to protect that. So disability insurance at that point was maybe $5 a month, if that, to protect the income that I was going to have. Again, the 529 plan, putting in $25 a month. Again, and how that adds up and how it compounds each and every month over each and every year. My daughters have been able to go to school, no student loans, and hopefully they appreciate it. We were talking about some like a 4-year plan, some like a little extended plan. But that is still, thank God, that has been funded as well based off of those sacrifices that we made. And yes, the numbers add up, but if we start early, you can do it. Again, it's not outside of reach. So I wanted to make sure, me and my wife wanted to make sure that we had the ability that if our children came to us and said, hey, Mom, Dad, we just got, we were able to go to Brown University. And Brown University right now at one point was the most expensive university in the state, in the country, at about $72,000, $73,000. We wanted to make sure that we had the ability to be able to send her right there. Again, if you got the grades, I'm hoping some scholarships across the board, but nonetheless, here you go. So making sure that we sit back and we do those things, but also continue to educate ourselves. So right now, I know, Ivory, you sit back and you're a financial advisor, being able to reach out to people like you. And that's one of the things that I did. I reached out to, I think at that point was American Express Financial Advisors back in the day. I'm not even sure if they're still around. And what they did was they asked me to invest $275 to create this black binder of all this information, what I did was I told him all of my dreams, my aspirations, how many houses I wanted, the cars that I wanted to drive, all this stuff, the big dream. And then he sat back and said, okay, Sean, you know what? For you to achieve that, you're going to start having to save this. You're going to have to do that. You're going to have this money to retire, one thing to another. And so I sat back and started with humble beginnings. But the key here, just like entrepreneurship, it's about starting now. There's never going to be a perfect time saying, when I get that raise, I'm going to do this. Or when I hit the lotto, I'm going to do this. Or, you know what, when my grandmother gives me some money. No, you know what? Start now. Start humble. Find the smallest investment that you can make and just crack the ice and just start chipping away. And over the course of the years, you'd be surprised in regards to how you can do it. And then what that does is that leads to the generational wealth, because now the tools that you've learned, of course, you're going to pass that on to your children. And so now you started here. Your children are going to start here. Your grandchildren hopefully will start there and keep on going. And that's, again, that's the simplest way of passing that generational wealth.
And so I'm going to put my financial advisor hat on real quick, because you mentioned estate planning. So if you don't have a will, the state determines who gets your assets.
Ooh, yes, they do.
You understand that, right? Let's say a young couple gets married, and the husband passes away, leaves everything to his wife, right? The wife gets remarried, titles everything in joint name with the new husband. She predeceases the new husband. The husband now gets all the assets. You've just disinherited your children. Mm-hmm. I'll give you another example. This property that I have. Let's say that I passed away. I'm going to leave it to my son. And so now my grandchildren will be getting that income. But let's say my son was only 12 years old. I want to put it inside of a revocable living trust, so I can determine when he gets it and how he uses it. So there's some estate planning tools. You have to go to a professional to start mapping this stuff out, because as Aris alluded to, when grandma passes away and she leaves it to the grandchildren, one child can force the sale, and then you're getting pennies on the dollar, as opposed to putting it in some type of a trust where she can set the parameters on whether they can refinance the property, who can live in the property, fund the revocable living trust so that you can pay the taxes. So there's some real structural things that we can do so we don't get gentrified out of our neighborhoods. Now, Eldridge, I know you had a question, you had a comment.
I do.
I do too.
Yeah, I think it's about to be the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sean said a certain word, education. Education and information. I'm very proud to be. I have the ability, or I've been given the distinct opportunity to work with a lot of, if not all of the service pieces that the Greater Washington Urban League has put in place, serving over 80 years in the District of Columbia to make sure that our community thrives. And one of the new programs that we've started this year is an FEC, a Financial Empowerment Center. This is a place where you can start in, I guess, what is baseline considered financial literacy and financial education, but we've taken that to another level. We're talking about financial well-being and financial management skills, capacity building. And we're taking that even a further step, where we're looking at financial psychology and financial therapy. There's a lot of people in this country right now, because of COVID, where a lot of the safety nets are not there anymore. And they are feeling stress. And stress is coming from that trauma. There's trauma on everything. And we understand that there's a lot of financial trauma as well. And what we're trying to do with this program is to lessen that trauma. We understand that we want to lessen up the stress, the fear, the anxiety, the embarrassment of looking at what your financial situation is and where you want to be, and finding out that there's some tools that you may have not gotten at home. There are some tools that you may not have gotten in your formal education. Some things you've not been privy to. And we are looking to fill that gap in as much as we can. We have a series of people who are financial experts in their areas. We have one of the only certified financial therapists in the area to talk about what are those things that have happened in your background, in your area, in your past, that are affecting or promoting your not so great financial habits. And how can we really look at that? How are you able to look at a budget and not just have it as a, dark, dirty word, a budget, but it's actually an active word for you to actually look at a spending plan, not just a budget, but a spending plan? How are you going to address those things? How are you going to look at how to set yourself up for the steps to do financial wealth building? All right, looking at where what your status is right now. So within the program, we're looking at those issues, and we're there to help those who are looking to go along that road.
I love hearing you bring up the Financial Empowerment Center, which is a model based off of Bloomberg in New York that we are now, starting to expand here in the district. It's actually an initiative I got to work on. So I'm happy to hear that you're part of that too.
Oh, we're going to be talking.
Fantastic. And what makes me excited about that is, as I was listening to Sean, and then I think about the work that Marshall does, and I saw us pop up in the chat, these are not conversations that we get to have very often, right? And when we do have these conversations, sometimes it's not filled with, accurate information, or it's the way so-and-so used to do it. So they're making that recommendation for how you should do it, right? And it's not necessarily the techniques or the strategies or the tactics that we need to start to advance from an economic foothold. And so, it was interesting. We were talking about what books we, like to read and what's informing us and what's shaping us as we do this work. And I'm a podcast junkie. And so one of the podcasts that I love is called Unbossed. And a woman named Thasonda Duckett, who is a CEO with JP Morgan, who I'm actually really obsessed with, was a guest on a recent series. And she shared that for Black women, their median wealth was $200. Did you hear me? $200. And so when we start to talk about how to increase our financial standing, very much like you, Ivory, I made purchases in underserved emerging markets where I could have sold or moved at this point tenfold, because when I bought the house or I bought the property, maybe I only made $30,000, $40,000 I got in. But the house I live in right now in Southeast is the same house I bought when I was a fellow 15 years ago. I'm not going anywhere because, I'm my equity is growing. Should something happen, because I do work in political cycles, if I lose a job, I can still cover it. And it is something, and I see the neighborhood changing. And I want to make sure that my daughter has an opportunity to reap some of this benefits for things that I'm sacrificing for right now. And, I know we work hard and we want to live well too, because we put in blood, sweat, and equity, but we are 5-6 generations behind. And so we can never catch up if we're burning through what we're making right now. And so for me, I do a lot of self-deprivation just so that my daughter, and not even just my daughter, but the babies that she may have, 15 years from now, can have what I'm starting to have because of what my mother did for me, right? And so when you hear that Black women who are securing degrees at higher rates than ever before, opening businesses at a faster rate than anyone else in the country, are heading households, are working jobs at higher levels than ever before, and they only have a median wealth of $200, that's problematic. So that's systemic, but it's also behavioral, if we want to be honest, right? So we have to make sure that when we are moving up the chain, that we're not taking that additional capital gain that we have and now blowing it or trying to live even higher and keeping up with the Joneses. It's well, maybe sit still for about 10 years. Let that money grow, right? So when I first opened my very first, stocks, it was $2,000. I had no idea what I was doing. I went to Wells Fargo Advisors and I'm like, here's $2,000, right? That was 20 years ago. And I've had to be patient when markets drop, even when COVID first hit. Man, I don't know about y'all. I mean, you were losing money at $10,000 a day. I mean, it was very scary, right? But I stayed still, prayed, and understood again, Eris, why are you doing this, right? It's not just for you. This is you. So you got to stay the course. And so I'm constantly trying to, promote as well, particularly to women, Black women, that, we got to look at some of our behavioral, how we move from a behavioral standpoint and how we're spending money. But that we got to just keep in mind that everything is not for us right now. We've got to build. And I'm going to share one last story. Somehow, some way, just to reiterate this, one day I ended up in a room with 75 of like the most influential people in the world. On the stage was Tony Blair, Bill Gates, and Jamie Dimon. Mm-hmm. And they had 75 of their friends from Germany, Canada, all over. And they were having a conversation about a new vaccine. I swear to God, I don't know how I was in this room. And I do know how, but I don't know how. And one of the prime ministers or somebody stood up or investor and said, and they wanted people to pledge like that day, like $1 billion each or something to build out this vaccine for Africa. It was investing in Africa. And their thought was if they could stabilize this disease, I forget which one it was, that they could begin to create a new base, right? Basically, we've decimated this continent so badly that we're actually missing out on money. So let's stabilize people's health. Let's get them educated and let's start to create this new level of consumers. And someone stood up and said, well, when will we start seeing a return on this investment? And I will never forget Jamie Dimon saying, oh, no, we're not. Right. He was like, this is like 20 years out, right? This is a couple generations out. And it was so prolific because they weren't even talking about creating this vaccine and stabilizing this market and this economy right now. I mean, they were already thinking 20 years further out, right? Like this is, and so understanding that in 20, 30 years, there's going to be a whole new middle class that emerges in these targeted countries in Africa, which is going to be a whole new set of economic opportunities for these major businesses and political leaders. And so I'm just sharing, this is how decisions are being made, and we've got to take our kind of hyper local personal approach and responsibility for that within our households and ourselves as well.
Well, to Eldra's point, sometimes we confuse our net worth with our self-worth. And a good example is people who may grow up without means. They grow up poor and they have to prove to people that they're no longer poor. How do you do that? You buy a car. You don't wave around a 401k statement. You might go and buy a big TV, but you don't have an umbrella policy that protects you if you were to get sued. You're not contributing into your 401k. But speaking of retirement, we're going to close with this comment, Marshall. It used to be that when people retired, they would get a gold watch. But I would imagine if you retire with the business and you sell that business, you retire with the gold watch factory. Talk to us a little bit about creating generational wealth with an exit strategy after you created a business.
Well, I think, I'm not, from a financial planning perspective, I don't have that type of knowledge in the sense to know, but using the knowledge to basically protect yourself, protect that actual business is key. And really trying to have it where you in turn have your children to understand how they in turn will take on the businesses once you in turn retire. I mean, I think that's really key. I think the other component of this, we've talked about organizations like the Urban League, the National Coalition, Black Women. My wife's a member of the Mecca chapter in Atlanta.
Oh, in Atlanta, absolutely. They're amazing.
Yeah, they do a very good job. And of course, 100 Black Men. I think organizations as such have a responsibility to really educate individuals. So when they in turn get to this point, they create not only programs to kind of have an entree into how to become an entrepreneur. I also think there needs to be a way on how to retire and do it in such a way where you in turn can project out how you would utilize your wealth. Your wealth may be in such a way where you have this, and then how do you in turn invest and give this away so you can have tax shelters? I think that's key in terms of when you in turn retire, to know exactly how you can protect yourself in that regard. So being members of organizations like we mentioned tonight, I think that will help you, and to have a financial planner. That is key as you begin to go through the life cycle and get to that point of retirement.
So just to give you the basic constructs, I'll just share with you some of the habits of the wealthiest clients I have. They do not own the most expensive house in their block. 50% of millionaires have never bought a brand new car. I do not have a wealthy client who does not own real estate. Understand, if you have rental property, somebody else is paying your mortgage.
That's right.
If you buy a house that's worth $500,000 and you rent it out, you get to depreciate that property. The government allows you to think of a glass of water. Every sip of water that you drink is deductible. The government thinks there's 27.5 sips in a glass of water for a rental property. That means with a $500,000 property with a cost basis, you can deduct $18,000. Watch this. Now your tenants pay off your house, right? Now you have an inflation-adjusted pension plan for the rest of your life. You pass away, that property is now worth $1 million. Guess how much your children get to deduct? Based on $1 million. Now they have a $36,000 deduction every year. Plus they've got still inflation-adjusted income, and they have equity, so they can buy more assets. So these are things that wealthy people have been doing. All wealthy people have the umbrella policy that I mentioned. They've done the estate planning. They maximize their 401k contributions. They have an emergency fund. That means they have 3 to 6 months of living expenses. And so they're very focused and they're very disciplined, and you never know who they are. So these are just some basic things that you want to start thinking about. The 529 plan. You can set up a 529 plan at Schwab for free. You go to ugift.com. You know what they give you? A code. You know what you do with that code? You give it to everybody on Facebook. You give it to everybody when it's time for the birthday parties, so they can contribute to your children's 529 plans. These are just the basic building blocks of creating wealth that over 20 or 30 years, as Aris has talked about, will not just improve your quality of life, but again, more importantly, improve the quality of life of your descendants. I'm waiting for some questions. Yes.
I agree. So one thing that, to your point that you mentioned, I'm hoping that everybody that's watching this here right now understands that they should be getting in contact with somebody just like you,
right,
so they can get to where they need to be.
I was like, let me call Ivory after this.
No.
So,
Right.
Yeah, so many people do not want to look truly in the mirror and see, because what they do is everybody's right in their own mind.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, the fact is, they sit back and they see somebody who's in incredible shape that does this, that does that. And guess what? The reality check is that they need to have somebody come in and fine tune what they've been trying to do. So in essence, you tell somebody your dreams, and then of course, allow them to sit back and kind of reverse engineer. This is how you're going to get to where you need to be. And what I love is the fact that there's every once in a while, there was those individuals of our past. For me, it was my grandmother. So my grandmother, Mama, she sat back, and I remember when she always used to tell me, I bought this house for you and the dog. The dog passed away, so the house is yours. When she passed away, I became the executive on her account. She had children. But guess what? She put all that power in my hands because she understood that the fact that I appreciated and understood that the education that she had poured into me, based on from being a young boy all the way through college across the board, she liked that. Everything came to me, and from that point on, I sat back and just kept on investing and turning things over. And even when we dealt with the mortgage crisis per se of 2007, whatever it might be, guess what? It was a benefit. I loved everything because you know what? I sat back and convinced my wife to move every 2 years, and we doubled up. Mm-hmm. And so I almost got to a point where I almost felt guilty. But you know what happens is if you surround yourself with people who have a knowledge base of saying, guess what? You know what? When life gives you lemons, let's make lemonade. What you did, Ivory, earlier in the show, you actually talked about the fact that what we're dealing with right now. Keep in mind, guys, yes, we're dealing with a pandemic, but not everybody is losing. I want to make sure that you make that extremely clear. Not everybody is losing. And so what you have to do is you have to continue to change your mindset. And it's something called, again, an infinite mindset. So right now, there is no particular one set goal. No, again, this is not where you hit it and you've arrived. You never will arrive. You keep on winning. You keep on winning. And when you take a loss, it's okay, because that loss means that you learn. But again, you keep on going.
Well, you mentioned a good point. Wealth never disappears. It just shifts. And so I'm curious, given that markets are disrupted, right? And disrupted means they're not as efficient as maybe they were a year ago. What are some business models or occupations that our viewers should think about getting into? Because you never skate to where the puck is, you skate to where the puck is going to be. Where should they be skating to right now? And I'll address that to the panel.
Well, again, I am in online lead generation. Again, to me, at the end of the day, the fact is that every business, I don't care who you are, you're always going to need customers. So being in lead generation has always worked out well for me. Again, I started in education, moved to grocery. From that point on, there's mortgage, insurance across the board. And in fact, right now, we actually started a group called Blacks in Lead Gen, because right now, there's only about 5 of us in this whole space, sometimes I feel. And with that in mind, our goal here is to recruit others in to make sure that, hey, you know what, the door may have not been extremely wide open, but it's not closed. And there is a lot of opportunity and benefits to actually sit back and to win here. But we need to be educated about that. So our goal here is to sit back and make sure that we go to the colleges and universities and make sure people understand that there's a career path. You don't have to just bump into this. You can actually seek it out across the board. So when it comes to lead generation, I think that's a big one. Anything dealing with, again, being online. Again, right now, where are people at? Right now, people sit back and they carry around their phone. What's probably the most valuable thing that you probably have on your person at any given time is your phone. Because
not my phone, because I have an iPhone 7. But we do have
somebody get that man a new phone.
We do have a question from Functional Plasticity. How does the role of poverty mindset interfere with developing mechanisms to influence economic power?
Yeah, I saw that question keep popping up. I was like, ooh, no. I think it goes back to a lot of kind of what we were talking about earlier with, not being so focused on the immediate, but thinking long-term and generationally. And, not wanting to necessarily be driven or motivated to try to keep up with the Joneses or impressing other people. And so, when you have that kind of mindset, that's how you function and you operate. And and you don't know what you don't know. And, oftentimes your environment, plays a key role in all of that. And I think it probably, Ivory, you talk about some of those traits of your clients. I would think that maybe for most of us, I don't know what backgrounds you all came from or what kind of neighborhoods or communities or opportunities. But when you are able to be exposed to new markets, new, people, new, better, different kind of ways of operating and functioning, you start to, your mind evolves, right? The way you think evolves. And so those things start to influence your behaviors. So back to that kind of behavioral conversation I was talking about, which definitely have, I think, an impact and an effect.
I think to that point, you have to sometimes expand your circle.
That's right.
Right now, if you're sitting back and you happen to be in an area that's impoverished, the fact is, maybe you might have to take the bus to a different area, maybe just walk around and get exposure to something else, right? And again, because you're only going to grow to where your mind can take you. And so that means, as far as goes, knowledge is power. Educating yourself, connecting with people, figure out somebody who has your job. So right now, there's an individual out there who has the position, the opportunity, the job that you want, that's in line for you. Guess what? See what their path was. And that's just mirror that. Because I wanted to be an investment banker. So what I did was I sat back and I looked at what every investment banker did and the licenses they had. And before I graduated from college, I had my Series 6, my 53, my insurance licenses, because all of them had it. And then I loved reading Black Enterprise magazine. So what I did was, from that point on, I sat back and I went through the table of contents, and I sat back and I called all the heads of the different departments, and I befriended them in some way, shape, or form, and asked if I could take them to lunch. And just for a moment of their time, one thing to another, because people love to talk about themselves.
Hey, Ivory, if I can tone in on that, I think the main thing out of the previous question was poverty mindset. which means that we have to figure out exactly, there could be many definitions of what poverty mindset is, many iterations.
Right.
So let me just take a stab at that. Poverty mindset. So some think that poverty mindset is that, oh, someone doesn't want to be out of what their certain condition is because they're benefiting from being there. So let's look at poverty mindset as not what somebody owes you, but what you owe yourself. What is it that you're waiting for somebody to give you something, but what can you give yourself as far as figuring out ways and opportunities to come out of that? Poverty mindset could also be that I'm in a situation and I'm in this alone, and it's dark, and it's scary. So getting outside of poverty mindset that you are in a situation and nobody else knows how you feel, that's wrong. Somebody else has experienced what you're experiencing right now, and they're trying to figure out ways of getting out of that as well. And there are people and resources that are there to help you as individuals and you as groups to figure out how to come out of that.
Well,
Poverty, stepping out of poverty mindset is, well, I don't know what the next step is. Well, figure out a plan of how you want to get out of that. If you feel that you're in a hole and you're sinking down in that, and that things are coming down upon you, everybody's filling that hole with rocks and boulders, instead of taking those rocks and boulders and having them hit you on your head, shift those rocks and boulders under your feet and figure out ways of stepping out of, or have other people to help you step out of that hole.
yeah, and,
Attack that poverty mindset.
and don't forget, I'll just add that a lot of times you see people wearing nice suits and ties, you don't realize they was once broke too. So with that, we're going to answer the next question is, applying for grants, venture capital can be intimidating process for new entrepreneurs. Do you all have contacts in your networks who would be willing to assist or know helpful programs? Anybody have any helpful programs? I know, Marshall, you've got a lot of programs with the transportation in terms of becoming an apprentice. There's the Greater Washington Urban League, the Coalition. Any thoughts on venture capitals and grants?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up grants, since I do oversee and coordinate a lot of grants on my daytime job we didn't really talk about. But so there are resources. And I think first and foremost, we actually have the Mayor's Office on Volunteerism and Partnerships, which does a lot of working with organizations. So I don't know if she's meaning like business grants or grants for not-for-profits, but we do support and provide some guidance around applying for grants. There's the DC Pro Bono Law Clinic, which offers a lot of free advice as well to kind of help you be grant ready and what you need to do. You would be surprised as well that a lot of the foundations are now beginning to also provide additional kind of capacity building support and opportunities to share with organizations and emerging business owners ways to be competitive. You have the Washington area WAKIF. I don't want to mess up their acronym. I mean, there's a lot of organizations who have free or low cost assistance. And for the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, when we do our grants, we always have, I don't want to call it a pre-bidder, but a pre-grant kind of orientation where we will take you through, here are the questions, answer the questions. A lot of times when people are going after funding, they like to get very elaborate and sometimes can walk or talk themselves out of funding. And I tell people, I go, well, how do you raise so much money? I just answer the questions. Whatever they ask me, I'm giving them that answer. I don't try to get too elaborate because sometimes you'll start to expose things that can be used against you. So, I just say, look, DC government, every agency that issues grants and DC government awards about $125 million annually in grants. There's always some conversation, or opportunity to learn how to go through it. If you look up small business assistance programs, you'll see the women's business centers, you'll see the DC Pro Bono Law, you'll see the WAKIFs of the area, etc.
Ivory,
at the Greater Washington Urban League, we do have an entrepreneurship center program. And through that entrepreneurship center program, we do offer coaching and counseling for entrepreneurs. who are in their nascent stage, who are in their novice stage, their ideation stage, and those who are active. Those who are in business and looking to grow their businesses. While we do this coaching and the counseling, are also a place of resource. So we will help you look at those areas that Sister Scales has talked about, and help you kind of navigate exactly what their applications are and how to best position yourself so you can take advantage of those opportunities as well.
Thank you. I serve on a board for the American Minority Advisory Council, which is headquartered in DC, AMAC. And AMAC has a lot of opportunities, particularly for women, with getting them in apprenticeship programs to be women business enterprises, particularly if you have an excellent idea to put something in a transportation environment, bus terminals, opportunities to do and sell goods and services in those areas. There are tremendous opportunities. The Conference of Minority Transportation Officials is another one, COMTO. And so when you look at these organizations, I would in turn look those up and visit, and also attend conferences and develop networks. That's very key when you're trying to in turn look for opportunities for grants, look for opportunities for apprenticeship programs, and opportunities to basically get funding to start your business. And so I think amongst us, all of us on this call, we have those contacts. So if you're interested, we don't mind providing those. So you can contact those individuals.
And to that point, let me just make sure I always want to focus on the mindset. As an entrepreneur, you can't be shy.
That's right.
Guess what? The only thing that somebody can tell you is no. So you know what? Right now, while we're on this call, let me get that out the way. I'm going to tell you no. You build the calluses around. So now you can feel free to go out there. Guess what? You're expecting no, perhaps. But guess what? When you get that yes, it's going to be like, okay. Because again, I'm a big believer in the fact is, again, I didn't wear my shirt and tie today, and of course my wife's not really happy about that. But if you guys can see my shirt here, it really, what it says is, again, it says, I think this one says, no one cares, work harder. Again, at the end of the day, the fact is we've got to put the time and effort into it.
That's
and
right.
you've got to build those calluses around it. So people are going to tell you no, but guess what? No is simply a request for more information.
That's it.
So no, you need more information. And again, eventually they're going to get it. They're going to catch up to it. So yes, we can find that funding, but also as again, and Marshall mentioned as far as the network, what I thought was interesting is this right now over the last few months, everybody's heard about the SBA loans. So right now there are existing entrepreneurs who again did not reach out to get those loans. You're talking about $150,000 at 3% interest over 30 years. You can't beat it. So now somebody give you $150K and you have to pay a year from now starting $700 a month. What is that? Guess what? You should, again, I don't care if you didn't need the money. You go get the money. Again, by far, again, get as much as you possibly can and then sit back and refinance everything else across the board. At 3%, they were giving you mortgage numbers. Again, and when I tell you the fact, don't think that you don't qualify. I've got a brother who I'm very close with. When I sat back and when they offered it to me initially, I didn't even ask for it. And I sat back and they sent me an email on a Sunday. And I'm like, okay, is this real? Okay, no, somebody wants some money. I'm not doing this. I sat back, looked it up, and guess what? For every business that I had, they sat back and offered me X dollars. I sat back, called up a couple of friends who actually were indebted to SBA, in 7 figures indebted, but yet they still got the loan. So I don't care what situation you're in.
That's called relationships, right?
Exactly.
Well, and you're talking about economic power. For people who have economic power, I mean, how did they get it? They got it by getting free money, free labor. I mean, that's how they were able to build it. So when there's these opportunities, hey, go ahead and take advantage of those opportunities.
Well, $750 in taxes. That's
Well, but
Thank you.
The closed mouth never gets full. And what's interesting in that first round of the PPP loans,
yes.
only 50% of small businesses even applied for it.
Yeah.
They even applied for it. So we have a question from our president. Considering this market, would it be wise to start a business now? What should I be afraid of?
I think yes, particularly in the transportation industry. I think when you talk about what people are going to do, they got to get from point A to point B in order to basically move goods and services, connect, etc. So you have to look at what are some areas that are non-traditional that we pretty much don't think about. I mean, everybody wants to go open up a coffee shop, right? Everybody wants to have this mindset. I'm going to open up a sneaker spot. The perspective is clearly understand what's out there and what do you use on a daily basis, and understand what's your passion, and then in what format and area can you sell or receive some type of service that will come back to you, whether it be through consulting, etc. I mean, I had an opportunity to work with my alma mater, Clark Atlanta University, this particular time frame. And essentially just really said, okay, how can we begin to build a brand for the university? I know Brother French was on last night. And so by the fact that I had some relationships with some people who came out of the B school, they in turn have a branding company with backgrounds in Coca-Cola, doing all kinds of different things. So the thought is, how can you begin to work with and build those relationships to do that? Well, we were able to put together a brand for the university. And that was an opportunity in a COVID environment. So, Brother President, I think I'm Brother President as well, of Omicron Phi Lambda chapter in South Atlanta. It's nothing to be afraid of. I mean, I would think when you look at this, and they talked about this poverty mindset, to me, what that says is understanding going from scarcity to abundance. Pretty much looking at these ideas and opportunities, there are a lot of people would think in this environment, there are not a lot of opportunities, but if that's prescribing to a poverty mindset, meaning scarcity. But if you have a perspective of abundance, that there are ideas out there that you can materialize and also to create some type of cash, you can in turn move in that direction.
And open up your another thing I would say is, when I got into the broker training program a long time ago, they asked us, how do you know if somebody has money? And everybody said doctors and lawyers, and they said no. The people who have money are the ones who manufacture the plastic ends of shoelaces.
That's it.
The people who make the people who sell the orange cones to the county.
That's it.
And so there are certain things that are infrastructure that you can do now. And by the way, right now, everyone's afraid. Okay, so the time to buy stocks isn't when they're on highs. You want to buy them when they're low, when everybody else is afraid. And so, just hope we can answer that question.
Yeah.
I also wanted to share. They have what they call these recession launched businesses. And I love, Airbnb was launched during the 2008 recession. Uber, WhatsApp, Dropbox. I mean, these are global businesses now, right? That these young up and comers, I mean, they were out of jobs and they were like, okay, well, let me now launch this business and see what happens. And so so always, I think there's just, Sean said it earlier, it's never going to be like the right moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sometimes you surprise what you thought was the worst moment. Again, me and my podcast, I learned that listening to How I Built This, which is an NPR podcast where they bring on CEOs. And I was like, recession launched businesses. Oh, okay. And then when I heard who they were, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So,
and guys,
brother,
you're sitting back and you are actually launching a new business. I think, and Brother Marshall brought this up extremely well. It's about your passion. Right now, there's no way you can't be an entrepreneur and it'd be some kind of fly by night, like, oh, I heard you can make money, so I'm gonna go do this.
Exactly.
It's not going to work.
Your commercials don't work.
I'll tell you right now, that gets old very, very quickly. And when it's 2, 3 in the morning and you're trying to make payroll and you're not paying yourself and all this other stuff, you're gonna sit back and you will abandon it and you will most likely fail miserably with that. But if it's a passion, that means you don't want to go to sleep because you're doing it. You can't wait to wake up because you're doing it, one thing to another. In essence, when I see people who have successful restaurants, they're living there. They're pretty much, again, across the board in there, making it happen. You have to have a passion and a love for it. That is, again, critical. It doesn't matter the overall environment. Sure, you're going to be affected by it, but guess what? Right now, one of my businesses actually has it where, right now, instead of being able to come into the restaurant, yes, you know what? It's about takeout. And so you reposition, make sure your apps. Again, one of the restaurants that I love in DC, and my wife love it, is called Oohs and Ahs.
Oh yeah.
Oohs and Ahs, oh my God. When I tell you they picked up their marketing left and right, And they must be, I think they send me a personal email every other day, because all I know is the fact is I want to sit back and I want to order from them constantly. But guess what? Now I have to believe they're doing probably better business now than they were pre-COVID.
Because the
Hey,
wealth
Ivory?
given from somebody else to them. Yes.
If I can chime in.
Well, I think we're gonna have to. We've been. I just got the hook.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we have to go. We got the hook. We're out of time, unfortunately. I think we've covered quite a bit of ground. I hope people found this informative. To your point, Eldridge, that you made earlier, I hope that people actually put some of these things into practice and not just talk about it, but be about it. So maybe in 4 or 5 years, we're not having the same conversation because, as our ancestors would tell us, it ain't easy being free. As we've also alluded to, there is this thing called an election coming up, and so I'd invite people to go to vote.org. Any questions you have about the voting process, go to vote.org. If you're interested in any of the works that we're doing at the OLA chapter, you can go to ola1906.org and see some of the functions that we have going on. And then obviously there'll be another discussion tomorrow about how the young people are carrying the mantle for social justice, and you can register for that obviously at cbcweek.eventbrite.com. So thank you very much for tuning in. I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. And remember, cast that ballot so we can make changes in government.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.